He humiliated me in front of the whole team, and thought I'd stay. I'd been working at Crawford & Lyon for 3 years. Between the glossy floors, glass walls, and endless Zoom meetings, my entire world revolved around one man, my boss, Kenneth Ward. He was unforgettable, always in a tailored suit, smile too perfect to be real, like he practiced it in the mirror until it felt like a brand. He could charm any client in a boardroom, and destroy you with a single sentence by the coffee machine. The first time he belittled me in a team meeting, I brushed it off. "Don't worry, that's just Ken's style," a coworker whispered. But when it happened again, and again, I realized Ken's style was a cocktail of narcissism and cruelty, garnished with a Hermes tie. He didn't just fail to appreciate me, he actively dimmed any light I tried to shine. I showed up early, cleaned up his messes, saved his sinking presentations, and got rewarded with sarcasm like, "Maybe next time just stay out of the way, Olivia." I swallowed it all, afraid to lose everything I'd worked for. But fear is a terrible guide. Especially when you're a woman who's finally done being quiet. I remember the moment it all shifted. It was a Tuesday. I'd been up until 2 a.m. finishing a market analysis that could change the trajectory of the firm's new investment strategy. It was my idea. My research. My pitch. I had poured every ounce of myself into that deck, 67 slides, cross-reference trends, predictive models, custom visuals. It was bulletproof. That morning, as I walked into the conference room clutching my laptop and a flat white, Kenneth was already there. Polished. Relaxed. Smiling like he'd slept like a baby. I didn't realize until he opened the meeting that he had my deck on his screen. No mention of me. No nod, no handoff. Just, "Let me walk you through a new framework I've developed." I froze. He walked them slide by slide through my work, adding a few shallow jokes to make it sound casual, like it was all off the cuff. The senior partners were nodding, impressed. One of them even said, "This is exactly the kind of innovation we need, Ken." My stomach twisted. I waited for him to credit me. Even just once. He didn't. After the meeting, I followed him into his office. My hands were shaking. "That was my presentation," I said, barely keeping my voice level. He raised an eyebrow like I'd said something cute. "Relax, Olivia. You're part of the team. Your work reflects on all of us." "No, Ken. That was my work. You took it." He sighed, looked away, and said the thing that finally cracked something deep in me. "Look, some people create, some people execute. You're good at supporting. Don't try to be something you're not." That night, I stayed late, sitting at my desk long after everyone left, staring at the skyline like it might offer answers. It didn't. But the silence helped me hear something I hadn't noticed before. The voice in my own head saying, "You're better than this." And for the first time, I believed it. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I had drafted a 3-page email to HR, outlining the pattern of credit theft, public belittling, and manipulation I'd experienced from Kenneth over the past year. I added screenshots, timestamps, even Slack messages he'd conveniently forgotten about. But just before hitting send, my cursor hovered. I knew how these things went. I'd seen what happened to women who spoke up without allies in the room. HR didn't protect people like me. HR protected the company. And Kenneth was the company's golden boy. Still, I couldn't keep letting him win. So I went smaller. I requested a one-on-one with our division head, Lisa Monroe, one of the few women in leadership. She was sharp, efficient, and not exactly known for emotional conversations, but I thought she might listen. She did. For about 5 minutes. "I understand your frustration, Olivia," she said, flipping through her notes like she already had her answer written. "But Kenneth has brought in record revenue this quarter. And frankly, I haven't seen anything that suggests misconduct." I blinked. "You don't think it's misconduct to steal someone's work?" She closed the folder. I think you need to focus on staying collaborative. That's how people move up here. In other words, shut up and smile. I left the meeting feeling like I'd been slapped without ever being touched. The next day, my access to 2 key project folders was removed. Restructuring, they said. I was told to shift my focus to internal analytics, in other words, the corporate version of exile. Kenneth passed me in the hallway later that afternoon. He didn't say a word. Just smirked. And I knew, he knew. I'd tried to push back. And he'd pushed harder. That was the moment I understood. No one was coming to save me. If I wanted justice, I'd have to become the one who delivers it. They didn't fire me. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they did something worse, they erased me. Overnight, my name vanished from 2 major projects I'd spent months on. I wasn't invited to meetings. Emails went unanswered. Junior analysts I used to supervise were suddenly reporting to someone else. It was like I'd become invisible. The final blow came during a client presentation for Sterling Tech, one of our biggest accounts. I wasn't even supposed to be in the room, just support, taking notes. But midway through the pitch, the lead associate stumbled over a key dataset. Kenneth looked at me, and without warning, handed me the mic. I should have been ready. But I wasn't. I didn't have the files, the graphs, the latest updates. I stammered. I tried to improvise. And I failed. Afterward, he made a show of thanking me in front of the client, a condescending little pat on the back, like a parent indulging a child. But behind closed doors? He tore me apart. You embarrassed this firm, he snapped. You were given a chance, and you blew it. I'm done cleaning up after your mistakes. Mistakes. Mine? By the end of the week, I'd been moved to a temporary internal role in the back office. No client access. No strategic meetings. No team. They'd clipped my wings, then blamed me for not flying. I sat alone in a beige cubicle that smelled like burnt coffee and old toner, staring at my reflection in a dark monitor. I'd fought. I'd worked. I'd endured. And still, it wasn't enough. That night, I took the subway home in silence. I didn't cry. Not anymore. But something inside me hardened. Because now, I wasn't scared of losing anything. I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I walked into the office like it was any other day. Badge swipe. Elevator ding. The same plastic smile for the receptionist. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't there anymore. Not really. My body was in the building, but my mind had already moved on. Around 10 a.m., I packed up the last of my desk into a plain black tote. No drama. No tears. Just the facts. I typed one final email. Subject, resignation. Effective immediately. No further correspondence necessary. Best. Olivia West. When I hit send, I felt nothing. And then, a flicker of something dangerous. Something electric. Freedom. No one noticed I was gone. Not Kenneth. Not HR. Not Lisa Monroe. They'd erased me long ago, I was just finishing the job. I walked down Fifth Avenue with no plan, no job, no title, but more clarity than I'd had in years. Somewhere between the gray buildings and honking taxis, I let the rage go quiet, and listened. And that's when I knew, I wasn't going to find another job. I was going to build something they could never take from me. That night, I pulled out my old laptop. The one I hadn't touched since grad school, back when I still believed I could change things, not just survive them. I opened a blank document. Wrote 2 words at the top. West Analytics. No funding. No team. Just me. And a fire I didn't need to explain to anyone. They'd buried me. But they didn't realize I was a seed. Starting a company sounds glamorous, until you're doing it in your kitchen with 3 mugs of cold coffee and a Wi-Fi signal that cuts out every 20 minutes. The first few weeks were chaos. I built a bare-bones website. Registered an LLC. Reached out to former colleagues, the good ones, and offered free audits in exchange for testimonials. I did my own branding, wrote my own copy, designed my own pitch decks. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. Money was tight. I drained my savings faster than I expected. Rent was a countdown. I ate boxed noodles. I cried, often, in the shower, because it was the only place where I could let it out and still feel like I was doing something productive. But every small win lit me up. My first client was a friend of a friend, running a mid-size e-commerce company. He was skeptical at first. "You used to work where?" But once I showed him the report I built, he hired me on the spot. Word started spreading. I leaned into what I knew, data that meant something. Not just numbers on slides, but strategy, vision, clarity. I wasn't just offering analytics. I was offering control. The kind I had been denied. I called the company West Analytics, not because I wanted my name on everything, but because I wanted to remind myself every day, this time, it belongs to me. One night, 3 months in, I got a LinkedIn message that made my breath catch. It was from Sterling Tech. The same client Kenneth humiliated me in front of. They wanted to set up a meeting. They'd heard about a boutique data firm doing things differently. I stared at the screen, stunned. Then I smiled. The game had just turned. And I was no longer playing defense. The meeting with Sterling Tech changed everything. I showed up in a blazer I'd bought secondhand, laptop in hand, heart pounding like I was walking into a courtroom. But the second I started presenting, all the fear disappeared. I knew my stuff. Better than anyone in that room. They didn't just like the pitch, they signed a 6-month contract on the spot. More than that, they introduced me to 2 more companies the same week. From there, it snowballed. I hired my first contractor. Then a second. We moved out of my apartment and into a tiny co-working space in Soho with mismatched chairs and terrible lighting. It didn't matter. We were building something real. Clients kept coming, from retail to healthcare to tech. They were tired of bloated firms with cookie-cutter solutions. They wanted results. They wanted strategy. They wanted us. We didn't do fancy brochures or glossy ads. We let the numbers speak. And then, one morning over coffee, my lead analyst, a brilliant woman I'd met at a networking event, looked up from her screen and said, "Hey, have you seen this?" It was an article. Crawford and Lyon faces internal shakeup amid revenue drop. I clicked. Skimmed. Paused. Kenneth Ward's name appeared in the second paragraph, lead partner under internal review. My heart didn't leap. It didn't race. It stayed steady. Because I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was just winning. Still, part of me wondered what it felt like over there. In the building I once thought defined my worth. I didn't have to wait long to find out. 2 weeks later, I got an email from a private equity firm. They were investing in distressed firms, including Crawford and Lyon. And they wanted West Analytics to help turn it around. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed 2 words. Let's talk. The boardroom felt smaller than I remembered. Or maybe it was me who'd grown. I sat at the far end of the long, lacquered table, the same one where I used to take notes, invisible in Kenneth's shadow. Now, my name was on the agenda. I was listed as the lead consultant and strategic partner under the firm's recovery initiative. The private equity deal went through. Crawford and Lyon was bleeding money, bleeding talent, and desperate to stay alive. The investors didn't want another dinosaur. They wanted transformation. They wanted someone who could cut through the mess and rebuild from the core. They wanted me. The irony? Kenneth didn't even know I was involved until the first joint meeting. He walked in late, like always, flipping through a tablet, his signature smirk in place, until he saw me. That smirk cracked. Just slightly. But I saw it. "Olivia," he said, with forced warmth. "Didn't expect to see you here." I smiled, calm, unfazed, precise. "I'm sure you didn't." The meeting was brutal. I didn't hold back. I laid out inefficiencies, outdated systems, ego-driven decision-making, all backed by numbers. And I made it clear that to move forward, the firm would need to restructure leadership. Afterward, one of the partners pulled me aside and said, "You didn't just diagnose the problem. You made us see it." By the end of the week, Kenneth was removed from his executive role. He was offered a lesser position, operational, report-based. He took it. He had no choice. And just like that, he worked for me. Not in name. Not in theory. In actual structure. Kenneth Ward, reporting to Olivia West. The girl he used to humiliate in elevators now held his future in her inbox. And I didn't feel vengeance. I felt balance. I didn't make it personal. That's what bothered him most. I didn't gloat. I didn't punish him. I simply managed him. Kenneth sent weekly reports, clean, over-edited, desperate to prove he still mattered. I reviewed them like any other deliverable, sent notes back without flair or tone. Just the facts. He tried small talk once. I ignored it. He asked to grab lunch sometime, catch up. I declined. What could we possibly catch up on? Word spread quickly through the firm. People who used to flinch at his name now copied me on their emails. Executives who once dismissed my ideas were quoting my strategies in board presentations. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply exists, and everyone adjusts around it. One afternoon, I passed Kenneth in the hallway. He was coming out of a budget alignment session I'd led. His face was pale, jaw tight, eyes scanning the floor. Not a word. I kept walking. I didn't owe him recognition. I owed myself peace. A week later, I found a note on my desk. It wasn't handwritten. Kenneth wasn't that sentimental. It was typed, printed, folded. "Olivia. I was wrong about you. And I'm sorry. K." I stared at it for a long time. Then I fed it through the shredder without blinking. Because here's the truth. Apologies mean nothing when they come from someone who only regrets losing. Not someone who regrets hurting. And I had no interest in healing his guilt. I wasn't here for closure. I was here to build. To lead. To rise. And I was just getting started. A year later, we moved into our new office, 4 floors above Crawford and Lyon. The view was better. Cleaner. Quieter. I watched the city from behind glass I now owned, not borrowed. The name West Analytics was etched in chrome on the wall behind me, but it wasn't the letters that mattered, it was what they meant. A company built without shortcuts. Without lies. Without men like Kenneth at the top. We grew fast, too fast, some said. But I wasn't afraid of fast anymore. I was afraid of standing still. Of shrinking. Of silencing myself to make others comfortable. So I spoke. I mentored. I hired women who'd been passed over. I listened to them. Fought for them. Promoted them. I made the kind of company I once needed. Kenneth still worked a few floors down. I rarely saw him. When I did, he looked smaller. Not just older. Diminished. Like a man who'd realized too late that the world had moved on, and that he wasn't the center of it anymore. Sometimes people ask me if I ever think about what he did. I don't. I think about what I did. I left. I built. I rose. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted freedom. And I found it. There's power in walking away. But there's even more in walking back. And realizing you no longer need to prove anything. Not to them. Not to him. Not even to yourself. You already did.